Hello there, my Fandom friends! Today we are back to talk about yet another Vinland Saga manga. Now I have read through book 10. This, of course, is by Makoto Yukimura, and I've been doing a series on my channel where I break down all of the manga that is not animated yet. So if you have only seen seasons 1 and seasons 2, which are currently animated right now, but have not read the manga yet, this video isn't necessarily for you because there will be major spoilers about this manga, as well as the themes of the past couple of manga that have not been animated yet. So at this time, if you have not read the manga for Vinland Saga and don't want to be spoiled, I recommend putting a pin in this video and coming back later. But that out of the way, we have lots to discuss, my thoughts, my feelings, kind of a summary breakdown of manga 10 of Vinland Saga. So starting at the beginning of this manga, we are introduced to two new characters that are kind of main characters throughout this whole book. We of course are introduced to Garm, which he is on the cover of this book, and then we're introduced to Floki's grandson. His name is Balder, if I am pronouncing that correctly. Starting off with Balder, we can see that he's just such a sweet, innocent kid who just wants to live his life, his childhood, and not have to think about this whole mess of just the Vikings and this whole mess that Floki has created. All he wants to do is fish and spend time with his grandfather, Floki. On the other hand, Floki doesn't really want to spend time with him in that way necessarily. He wants him to kind of have this future of becoming the leader of the Vikings. But of course, that's not what he wants. Garm, on the other hand, seems to be a very interesting character so far. We already see him end the life of somebody, and he just seems very playful, almost weasel-like, and that's all we really get of him in the beginning. More on him later. We of course then cut to Siggy and all of his complaints to all of his friends. Why has his life come to this? All of that good stuff with Siggy. Basically, he's just a complainer. That's really all we know about him so far. However, something that does pique his interest is getting to meet almost this celebrity-like kind of thing that he sees in his mind is Thorkill, and he really enjoys that, and he hopes to fight by his side in the future. We then move on to Thorfinn, which the last thing we saw of Thorfinn from manga 9 was those two men that were trying to help him and bring them to their leader, if I'm pronouncing his name right, Vagan? Anyway, Thorfinn is not pleased, and I can understand why. He just wants to move on with life. Literally, people just leave him alone because that's all he wants. He just wants peace, he wants his friends, he wants his family, he wants to make the world a better place without violence. And I understand that Vagan and his people are trying to help him, but not in the way that Thorfinn necessarily wants or that he thinks is best for him. It's at this time that Thorfinn realizes that Floki is the one that orchestrated Thor's death. Of course, Thorfinn's father, who was ended by Askeladd. This was all said within this whole group meeting that they kind of have with Thorfinn, and then at that point, I'm just like, oh my gosh, the seed of kind of rage and revenge and hatred and fighting has now been placed in Thorfinn's mind again, and I'm very upset by that because this all wouldn't have happened if they would have just left him alone. He would have continued on with life. But of course, that's not the way it occurs, and he now knows that Floki is kind of this Askeladd figure that he's been thinking of since season 1. That Floki is actually behind all of this, and not exactly Askeladd. We then get a character that was back from season 1, the first couple of mangas. We have one of the brothers, Attili. Now, I believe this was the character that Askeladd basically said to him, you need to leave, you need to rethink your life, you're not meant for being a Viking and this whole battle, just go live out the rest of your life in peace with your family. And of course, at least I and probably so many other people just wanted what was best for him. But no, it seems that Attili has kind of made this life of thievery and fighting still after leaving Askeladd's band of Vikings. And now, of course, he's been captured and basically given Thorfinn away by this group of people, which isn't really in anybody's favor, honestly, at this point. And Thorfinn is yet again left with the decision of what he needs to do, if he is going to avenge his father or if he is going to move on with life. yet again, this pit stop, this obstacle in his way where he just can't seem to move on. And of course, Hild is just in his ear the whole time, and she's like, well, if you know, wrong-do this person, if you kill this person, whatever, your life is gonna end, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, calm down, please. Like, he is having a moment. He's scared. He doesn't know what to do. Back off. I like Hild, but please just shh. During this whole conversation and ordeal that Thorfinn is going through, we jump to Thorkill and Siggy, who are both on this boat, and Siggy is now going to kind of work under Thorkill, and they're going to fight kind of side by side, which is what Siggy ultimately wanted. Thorkill's intrigued, but you know, he also probably doesn't really care. He just wants to see how this plays out. Of course, at this point, Garm is also on their side, and they are now tasked with this battle that has been set kind of in place by Floki, and Thorkill is kind of also working kind of under him as well. Thorfinn and Hild find their way out. They are leaving this group of people because, like I said before, they want nothing to do with this, especially Thorfinn. Hild is just kind of observing, and they end up taking all of the women kind of workers that this place had and taking them away to safety so that they can hopefully get back home. Again, I'm just loving Thorfinn more and more with every book. He just wants to help people. He just wants to save people and bring peace to the world. That's really all I want in life too. But they don't make it far because Garm catches up to Thorfinn and really wants to fight him. He even presents the head of Vagan himself, leaving, you know, Thorkill just kind of behind, which later on Thorkill is insanely upset by because all he wanted to do was fight as usual. Garm just seems like he's just kind of doing his own thing. Again, he just seems very playful and sly and just kind of out for himself. This whole idea of just battle equals fun is really all he has in his head. And he reminds me a lot of Thorkill because he wants to battle Thorfinn because he thinks that Thorfinn is really skilled, and so he wants to test his own abilities and see like who would win. And he thinks it's obviously gonna be himself because he's very high strung like that, and I feel like arrogant. He knows he has tricks up his sleeves, and yes, he does. I really enjoy how Hild and Garm as characters really expand this whole like weapon knowledge of what was there back then. Also, in accordance to just them as characters in this story, I think it's really interesting how both of them have tricks up their sleeves with these weapons that they've created themselves that aren't exactly like traditional weapons, of course, that they knew back then. So for example, with Garm and his spear, it is very different than a traditional spear. He also wields it very differently to maximize the reach of how far the spear can go. He holds it differently. He can split it into two. And Thorfinn, of course, didn't know that. So Thorfinn is very quick. He's very agile. He likes to run away and dodge, but he ends up getting stabbed by the spear, which I was like, ugh. No more harm to Thorfinn, please. Of course, that is not enough to take Thorfinn out, and he gets away. The two boys have a really interesting conversation. Thorfinn really just wants to just get away again, live his life. He has nothing to do with Garm. And Garm doesn't really understand that. Like, he just wants to have a good time and fight because that's all he really sees in life. I love the part when Garm offers Thorfinn a knife so that he can fight back, and Thorfinn's just like, no, don't boil this down to two options. It's not that you die or I die. He smiles and then he just runs away, and Garm is like, what? Like, he's just so dumbfounded by this course of action that Thorfinn's taking, and like probably all of this like amazing things that he's heard about him that he deems as like amazing that Thorfinn has done in his past is just like not adding up, and Garm is just so confused. Now, yes, Thorfinn escaped Garm, but that doesn't exactly take Garm off of his trail, because what Garm decides to do instead is target Thorfinn's friends. Again, something I hate in a story. I'm like, if you have something to pick with someone, deal with it themselves, not like their loved ones. And I know it's like such a strong story point, but it annoys me so much because it stresses me out so much. But I guess that's a good thing because it shows that I care about these characters. Basically, what Garm ends up doing is using some random girl to approach Thorfinn's friends. And she's like, are you Thorfinn's friends? And they're like, oh yeah, we know Thorfinn, blah, blah, blah. And then the girl runs back to Garm, and Garm's like, all right, got it. I know who to target now. And then, oh my gosh, Bug Eyes, bless his heart, he tried so hard to, I don't know, fight Garm. He thought he stood a chance, or maybe he was just kind of fooling it the whole time to try to buy them time or something, because you know he looks up to Thorfinn so much and relies so heavily on him. But he ends up not winning through this entire scene that I just can't wait to be animated. It is so silly. And Bug Eye completely just gets his butt kicked, and Einar, Leif, and Gudrid are taken away by Garm after Bug Eyes wakes up, and he is left with Carly and Carly's mama, which is like his greatest nightmare, it seems. He does not want to take care of a baby and a dog, much less on his own. We had a really sweet kind of change of pace in the story, and we jumped to a couple pages called Vinland Saga, and it's about Carly and Carly's mama, which is the dog, and how basically the dog views herself as being Carly's mom, and how she always wants to protect him. She's not very fond of Bug Eye and what he has to say about the baby, but she likes Thorfinn and basically anyone who cares for this child. But I thought that was really sweet and just a cute change of pace. We then cut to a scene of Canute from half a year ago. Canute and his men, I believe it's Wolf that's with him, which is kind of like his second in command guy. And they're kind of just like walking through, observing the land, making plans for the future, things like that. I thought this was really interesting because we have not seen Canute in a really long time, at least to my knowledge. So that was cool seeing Canute again, and also seeing how much he's grown up. And we kind of saw that like flashback to then, because Wolf is now working with Thorkill kind of under Canute's orders. And we can see that Thorkill does not appreciate that at all. He just wants to do his own thing. He really does not care about Canute, and he just wants to proceed onto what he loves best, which is just fighting and war. We jump back to Floki and Garm is like, yeah, so I didn't really succeed in my mission to end Thorfinn, and he just makes the silliest faces. I'm just like, dude, like, I love and hate Garm because he's just so fun and silly, but again, like, everything he stands for, I'm just like, I obviously don't agree with or approve, but he is just so silly. And honestly, he reminds me a lot of Thorkill, just like really young. But all of his sweet talk and jokes basically ends him up in jail by Floki, because Floki is just not having him and his personality at all. We jump back to Thorfinn making his way back to Bug Eye, and he is just ecstatic to see Thorfinn because he does not want to change another diaper. I love Bug Eyes, but like, he has a lot to learn. We're jumping all over the place here, but that's just kind of how the story rolls, because this book was just so extra chaotic and fun. But then we see that Garm ends up in Thorkill's hands. Thorkill is not very happy with him because Garm is the one who basically wanted to do what Thorkill wanted, which was to end Vagn's life. And Thorkill's not very happy about that. However, he spares his life because he wants to fight him. He wants to see how skilled this kid is. Maybe he reminds him of Thorfinn. He just wants to have a good time. We see that Floki isn't very fond of this either, because he's realizing that Thorkill is going against his orders, which honestly, like, I don't think that was a surprise to anybody. And if Floki like thought that Thorkill would never do that, he must be a fool, because Thorkill just does what he wants whenever he wants to. He's like a giant kid, so I was not surprised by that. I'm honestly glad that he's gone against Floki, because he also doesn't know that Floki kind of orchestrated Thor's death. And Thorkill, something I love about him is how close he was to Thor's and how he really treated him and thought of Thor's as a genuine friend. We see that Garm is actually in jail right across from the people that he literally captured, Einar, Gudrid, and Leif. And we see that Balder actually comes down and he wants to help them escape. He reveals that he's actually a distant cousin of Thorfinn, which I didn't really put that together, but it makes sense. He looks very much like Thorfinn, and I love that because we have yet another character who probably isn't totally into this whole war thing, which is great, again, because this is a young child that has that mindset. We don't want another Thorfinn case to happen, everything that Thorfinn went through season 1, just with a different kid. So Balder, I think, is on a really great track to being a successful person. We jump back to Thorkill and Garm's fight. This was very much decreased in the manga. However, I feel like once this is animated, we're gonna get a lot more of that whole battle, because it kind of just started, we jumped to something else, and then we came back and it was kind of just over. And, you know, obviously nobody died or anything. We both still have these really cool characters. So I feel like a battle more expanded would be really cool in the anime fashion. A battle has now begun, which ties in the whole title of basically every single chapter in this book, which is the war in the Baltic. And while this whole battle is started, while Thorkill and Garm are messing around, we have Balder trying to get these people out of the hideout. And he actually knows of a secret passage through the well that can get them out. Of course, we have Leif and we have Einar get escaped. However, Gudrid is not that lucky, unfortunately, and she has to stay behind because they weren't fast enough and they got caught. And so now she's kind of posing as a servant to kind of hopefully fit in. Throughout these past 3 manga, Gudrid has really grown on me. I just love how free-spirited and just how silly she is, especially for that time period when I feel like women were kind of supposed to be proper, the people who took care of the kids and the household and, you know, all that stuff. But Gudrid is so different, and I feel like Linesmore was just like nowadays, the modern times, and I really love that for her. But one of the scenes that made me laugh so much was when the guard was coming and she blamed Leif and Einar's voices in the well on her passing gas. I was like, you literally are incredible and I love you so much. You love your friends so much and you want them to succeed and get out of there. And here comes the part when I get increasingly stressed because multiple reasons. Our group is splitting up even more. We have Bug-Eye and Carly, Carly's mama. We have Thorfinn and Hild. We have now Gudrid and this random kid that we don't know a ton about yet. And we have Leif and Einar. Everyone's split up and I'm so stressed because I just want them all to get back together again. However, something that's stressing me out even more is that when Einar and Leif are getting away, Leif gets shot from behind. And when I tell you I screamed because if Leif dies, I will not be okay. He better not die, and it looks like he's okay as of right now. Einar, of course, was there to help. Getting shot with an arrow isn't the best thing to happen to you, so I know that Leif is incredibly strong, but he's also getting really old, and something that the author has pointed out is that, people in these times didn't really live that long. They lived to, 50 years old because of the war and everything going on, and so he's up there in age too. He does not deserve this kind of life. Again, with the whole Thorfinn thing, he just wants peace too, man. He just wants to make it to Vinland. And basically in our final scene, when we have Thorfinn meet up with Thorkill and Siggy and all these people, he's feeling the same stress I am because everyone is bombarding him. They're like, Gudrid is still stuck inside. Thorkill is like, you need to make a decision. Why is my hair curly? What happened to my hair? Which was so funny and made me laugh so much. Siggy is there complaining as ever about anything and everything, and Thorfinn's just like, one at a time, please. Trying to solve the problem by one person at a time as this enormous war is breaking out behind them. I'm like, please, someone give this kid a break. And that's basically the end of the manga. Very chaotic. I feel like manga 11 is going to be so much more chaotic than this manga, especially because that whole manga is also titled War in the Baltic throughout every single chapter. So I don't know what the anime is going to be doing because it's going to either be a really long season 3 or they're going to split it and it's going to be kind of awkward. So probably once I finish the manga in its entirety through the whole story, I'll make a video on how I think season 3 and potentially further is going to be animated. However, as of right now, that is going to wrap up my thoughts on manga 10 of Vinland Saga. If you have read this, let me know in the comments down below what was your favorite part or something that you enjoyed me talking about in this video. I will of course be reading on. I have only a couple manga left until the end of the series and I'm actually losing my mind over that because I love this so much. I'm obsessed. Also, something I forgot to mention before is I think that Gudrid is starting to have feelings for Thorfinn. There's a couple scenes where it just looks like she's blushing or kind of trying to come to terms with her feelings inside. I don't think Thorfinn really really reciprocates that as of right now, just because he has so much on his mind. I think that they would be really cute together, and so I'm really curious to see more of that as well in the future of Vinland Saga. But as for right now, I will see you next time with another video. Bye!